My parents laughed when I said I worked in tech. Stop joking around, my dad said. Go get a help desk job. But tonight, at my brother's engagement dinner, his fiancée went stiff. She stared at me and whispered, You're the CEO we just owed $190 million to. Imagine building an empire in the shadows, creating something genuinely revolutionary, only to be dismissed as an underachiever by the very people whose love you craved. How deeply would that sting, and what would it take to finally reveal your truth, even if it meant risking everything? My hand trembled, a barely perceptible tremor, as I reached for the pen. $190 million. The number blazed at me from the acquisition agreement, sprawled across the polished mahogany of the conference table. Around me, a dozen executives in custom-tailored suits waited in respectful, almost reverent silence. They were waiting for me, Chloe Elizabeth Hayes, to sign away 6 years of my life's work. Take your time, Ms. Hayes, Daniel Miller, CEO of Titan Innovations, said, his voice a calm tide of assurance, the kind of patience only afforded to someone about to write a check with 8 zeros. I glanced up, my eyes sweeping across the floor-to-ceiling windows of the 40th floor boardroom. Chicago stretched out below, an intricate tapestry of lights and shadows, its iconic skyline punctuated by the very smart buildings that Cityscape now managed. Somewhere in that sprawling urban labyrinth, my parents were probably having a quiet lunch, utterly oblivious that their struggling daughter was moments away from becoming one of the youngest self-made female entrepreneurs in prop tech history. The bitter irony wasn't lost on me. In just 3 hours, I'd be sitting at my brother Ethan's engagement dinner, listening to my mother suggest I apply for entry-level positions, while I secretly carried the weight of a 9-figure exit in my pocket. Ms. Hayes. Samantha Reed, Titan's VP of Corporate Development, leaned forward slightly, her perfectly manicured fingers drumming once, softly, against her leather portfolio. Any final questions before we proceed? I almost laughed. Samantha had no idea that in exactly 3 hours and 27 minutes, she'd be shaking hands with my brother across a white tablecloth, introducing herself as his fiancée. No idea that the family dinner she'd mentioned postponing for the signing was the exact same dinner where I'd planned to silently play the role of the underachieving younger sister. Life, it seemed, had a truly twisted sense of humor. I pressed the pen to the paper, signing my name, Chloe Elizabeth Hayes, CEO and co-founder, Cityscape Technologies, with steady, unyielding strokes. The room erupted in polite applause. Handshakes and congratulations followed, but my mind was already racing, catapulting towards the conversation I'd dreaded and anticipated for years. Tonight, my two worlds would collide in the most spectacular, terrifying way imaginable. Chloe, computers are a hobby, not a career. Those words, laced with gentle dismissal, echoed in my head as I set the signed contract aside, my thoughts drifting back to where it all began. Highland Park, Illinois, 1998. I was 8 years old, cross-legged on our pristine hardwood floor, utterly absorbed in the family's new gateway computer. In the next room, my brother Ethan practiced violin. Our house wasn't just a home, it was a monument to achievement. Dr. Richard Hayes' framed medical degrees lined the hallway. My mother Eleanor's law school diplomas and Bar Association awards dominated her home office. Ethan's academic trophies built an entire bookshelf. And there I was, teaching myself basic HTML. They discussed my concerning lack of focus in hushed kitchen conversations. Dad's obsession with traditional success wasn't arbitrary. I learned years later that he'd lost a patient early in his career due to a communication error between departments, a preventable tragedy that solidified his belief that only established, regulated professions could be trusted with important work. Technology, to him, was unproven, unreliable, a wild frontier. Mom's fierce commitment to conventional achievement stemmed from a different place. Eleanor Hayes had clawed her way to the top of a male-dominated law firm in the 1980s, earning respect through traditional markers of success that no one could question. She learned that in a world doubting women's capabilities, the safest path was the most conservative. They weren't cruel parents. They loved me, yes, but through the lens of their own hard-won wisdom, which meant steering me away from anything that looked risky or unconventional. Chloe built a website for her school project. I announced proudly at dinner one night when I was 15, having spent 3 weeks learning CSS to create an interactive timeline for my history class. "That's nice, honey," Mom replied, with that particular smile that never quite reached her eyes. "But you should be focusing on debate team. Colleges want to see sustained commitment to activities that build real skills." Dad nodded, already turning to ask Ethan about his advanced chemistry project. The message was clear: real achievement happened in operating rooms and courtrooms, not at computer screens. My bedroom became my sanctuary. While Ethan's walls displayed framed academic certificates and science fair ribbons, mine featured printouts of code snippets and sketches of user interfaces I'd designed. I'd stay awake until 2 a.m. learning Python and JavaScript, then stumble through AP Biology the next day, not because I was interested in biology, but because both my parents assumed I'd follow Ethan into medicine. They never asked what I actually wanted. The disconnect deepened in high school when I developed a program that streamlined our school's student scheduling system, cutting administrative time in half and eliminating conflicts that had plagued them for years. The principal called it remarkable innovation. My parents called it a nice extracurricular activity. "Your daughter has extraordinary technical intuition," Ms. Davies, our computer science teacher, told them during parent-teacher conferences. "She should seriously consider pursuing computer science in college." "Oh, Chloe has many interests," Mom replied diplomatically. "But we're focusing on her pre-law requirements. She needs to build a foundation for real career opportunities." I wasn't even planning to apply to law school, but they'd already mapped out my future. The breaking point came during my junior year. I'd spent months preparing for the Midwest Code Challenge, developing an inventory management system that local businesses were actually asking to license. The competition finals fell on the same Saturday as Ethan's acceptance celebration for Oakwood University's pre-med program. "We're so sorry, sweetie," Mom said, not looking particularly sorry. "But Ethan has worked his entire life for this. You understand, right? Maybe next time." I competed alone, the only participant without family in the audience, and won first place. The judges, all professional software engineers, told me I had natural talent and vision that universities would fight over. I came home clutching my trophy to find our house full of relatives celebrating Ethan's acceptance. My first place finish warranted a distracted, "That's wonderful, dear," from Dad before he returned to toasting my brother. That night, lying in my bed and staring at the ceiling, I made a decision that would define the next 15 years of my life. I would succeed on my own terms, without their validation. I would build something so undeniable that they'd have no choice but to see me clearly. I just had no idea how long that would take. College applications became a battleground. My parents pushed for Ivy League schools with strong pre-law programs. I applied to state universities with excellent computer science departments. When my acceptance to Oakwood University's Tech Institute arrived with a merit scholarship, their reaction was swift and decisive. "You're throwing away your potential," Dad said, disappointment evident in every syllable. "Your test scores could get you into Yale." "Computer science?" Mom's voice rose, incredulous. "That's not a field for someone of your capabilities." What they really meant was, "That's not a field worthy of a Hayes." Ethan, home from his first year at Oakwood's medical program, tried to mediate with his usual well-meaning condescension. "Maybe it's just a phase, Mom. Let her get it out of her system." Before law school. Get it out of my system? As if my passion for technology was some kind of illness that needed curing. I left for college that fall carrying their disappointment like a physical weight in my chest, but also with a lightness I'd never felt before. Finally, I could pursue what I loved without constant judgment. Oakwood's campus was liberation. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the daughter squandering her potential on computer games. I was Chloe, the student professors singled out for innovative approaches to complex problems. I found myself surrounded by people who spoke my language and valued what I could create. During sophomore year, I met Maya Sanchez in advanced algorithms. while other students struggled with the final project, designing an efficient system for real-time data processing. Maya and I finished ours in half the assigned time and added features the professor hadn't even requested. "You two think differently than most programmers," Professor Chen told us after class. "You see the human element in technical problems. That's rare." Maya and I started grabbing coffee after class, staying until the campus cafe closed, talking about technology's untapped potential. She was brilliant, driven, and like me, came from a family that didn't quite understand her path, though her parents' skepticism was gentler, rooted in concern rather than outright dismissal. "The real estate industry is completely broken," Maya said one night, her laptop open to an article about inefficient building management systems. "My dad manages commercial properties in Phoenix. Half his day is wasted on stuff that should be automated, tracking who's in which space, managing access, coordinating maintenance. It's like the industry stopped innovating in 1995. What if we could change that?" I asked, and something clicked. Over the next week, we sketched ideas on napkins and whiteboards, envisioning a platform that would revolutionize how buildings managed everything from access control to space utilization. By semester's end, we had the skeleton of what would eventually become Cityscape. Summer break meant returning to Highland Park, where nothing had changed except my growing conviction that I was meant for something bigger than my family could imagine. "So, what exactly do you do for work?" The question came from my Uncle Frank at Thanksgiving dinner, 2018. I was 25 and Cityscape had just closed our series of funding round. Our platform was managing 12 commercial buildings across Chicago, and we'd been featured in Innovation Properties magazine as ones to watch. "I work in property technology," I said carefully. "Database management, mostly." Not technically a lie, just dramatically incomplete. "Oh, like IT support?" Brenda chimed in. "That's good steady work. Are there opportunities for advancement?" Across the table, Ethan, now a second-year resident, received a 15-minute ovation for successfully assisting in his first major surgery. I sat there, knowing that our company's algorithms had prevented 3 security breaches and optimized energy usage for over 50,000 office workers that month, and said nothing. The isolation was crushing, but it was also protective. I'd learned to guard my professional life from people who'd never valued it, even as that life grew increasingly remarkable. Maya and I had moved to Chicago after graduation, subletting a cramped studio apartment in Wicker Park. We lived on ramen and coffee, coding until our eyes burned, taking freelance web development gigs to pay rent. Our first office was a corner table at a 24-hour diner on Division Street. We incorporated in Delaware, like every proper startup, filed our patents, and started pitching to VCs along the entrepreneurial circuit. The early rejections were brutal. PropTech is too niche. Building management isn't sexy. 2 college kids can't disrupt legacy real estate. You realize we're completely insane, right? Maya said one night at 3 a.m., debugging our authentication system while surrounded by empty energy drink cans. Probably, I agreed. But we are insane with purpose. Cityscape's core innovation was elegantly simple, a SaaS platform that used biometric authentication to seamlessly integrate building access, space management, and user analytics. Employees could enter buildings, book conference rooms, order food, and access services with a simple fingerprint or facial scan. Building managers could track utilization patterns, optimize energy usage, and enhance security through real-time data analytics. What made it revolutionary wasn't the individual components. Other companies had pieces of the puzzle. It was the integration. We created a comprehensive ecosystem that turned legacy buildings into responsive, intelligent environments. We were disrupting an industry that hadn't innovated since the 1990s. Our first breakthrough came through Professor Chen, who connected us with Maria Rodriguez, a frustrated property manager at a downtown office complex. "Show me what you've got," Maria said during our pitch, her skepticism evident. She'd been burned by tech promises before. We implemented a pilot program in her building over a weekend. By Monday morning, her maintenance requests had dropped by 60%. Her security team could track every access point in real time, and tenants were raving about the seamless experience. "How soon can we expand this to our other properties?" Maria asked. That first contract for $50,000 felt like winning the lottery. We celebrated with deep dish pizza and cheap champagne, dreaming of the empire we'd build. The early years were relentless. 18-hour days, constant pivots, the emotional roller coaster of startup life. We moved into a tiny shared workspace in River North, then gradually expanded as we hired our first employees, Liam, a brilliant back-end developer who could optimize our databases, Noah, a UX designer who made our interfaces intuitive, Olivia, a sales manager who could convince skeptical building owners to trust new technology. Meanwhile, my family relationships became increasingly superficial. Sunday phone calls were exercises in creative vagueness. "How's work going?" Mom would ask. "Good, busy, learning a lot." "Are you making decent money?" "Enough to get by." These weren't technically lies, but they weren't truths either. By my 29th birthday, Cityscape was generating $2 million in annual revenue and managing buildings that housed 30,000 workers daily. I was paying myself a modest salary, lower than my expenses, too. Keep reinvesting in the company. So, getting by was accurate, even as my equity stake grew increasingly valuable. The cognitive dissonance was exhausting. In professional settings, I was a rising star whom industry publications were beginning to notice. At family gatherings, I was the daughter who'd never quite found her footing. "Chloe's friend, Kevin, is doing really well," Mom mentioned during one of our calls. "He just made partner at his law firm. I could arrange an introduction if you're interested." The subtext was clear. Maybe I could marry success if I couldn't achieve it myself. "Thanks, but I'm pretty focused on work right now," I said. "Of course, but you can't work forever without thinking about your future." "You're 27, honey." Ethan's already talking about engagement rings. My future? If only she knew, I was literally building it, one line of code at a time. The distance between my two worlds grew wider as Cityscape gained momentum. We landed our first enterprise client, a Fortune 500 company that wanted our platform across their entire Chicago portfolio. Then another and another. Tech publications started paying attention. I was careful to keep a low profile, doing interviews, but requesting that photos show only the back of my head or silhouettes. In articles, I was Chloe H., co-founder, or simply Cityscape's reclusive CEO. The mystery enhanced our reputation, the brilliant but camera-shy woman revolutionizing prop tech. "Don't you want more recognition?" Maya asked after I declined another profile opportunity. "You've earned it." "I do want recognition," I admitted. "Just not yet. And not from strangers." What I couldn't articulate, even to Maya, was my complicated relationship with validation. I wanted my family to see me, really see me, but I wasn't sure I could handle them taking credit for my success or finding ways to minimize it once it became undeniable. Besides, there was something powerful about building an empire in silence. The breakthrough moment came in early 2021. We'd been quietly revolutionizing building management for 3 years when the pandemic hit. Suddenly, every property owner needed real-time occupancy data, contactless access systems, and flexible space management. Cityscape wasn't just useful, it was essential. Our revenue tripled in 6 months. We hired aggressively, moving into a beautiful office space in the Loop with views of Lake Michigan. I could afford a gorgeous apartment in Lincoln Park, but I kept it minimal and never mentioned the address to my family. When relatives asked about my living situation, I described it vaguely as a place near downtown with roommates. Technically true, since Maya lived 2 floors down. The Series B funding round closed at a $45 million valuation. Suddenly, we had the capital to expand nationally, the team to execute our vision, and the market recognition that opened doors to previously impossible partnerships. "We need to talk about scaling," Maya said one morning, spreading partnership proposals across our conference table. "Microsoft wants to integrate our platform with their smart building initiatives. Amazon's interested in our data analytics for their real estate division. We can't handle this growth organically." She was right. Success was accelerating beyond our ability to manage it internally. We needed infrastructure, systems, and, frankly, expertise that only came from acquisition or massive investment. "What are you thinking?" I asked, though I suspected I knew. Strategic acquisition. Find the right partner who can scale our technology without destroying our culture. The idea terrified and exhilarated me in equal measure. Acquisition meant validation on a scale I'd only dreamed of. It also meant my secret would become public record. There would be press releases, interviews, public valuations that my family couldn't ignore or explain away. Was I ready for my two worlds to collide? The first acquisition inquiry came from tech venture capital in late 2021. Their offer was flattering but premature, $25 million for a company we knew was worth significantly more. Maya and I spent exactly 7 minutes considering it before politely declining. "They don't understand what we've built," Maya said as we walked along the lakefront after that meeting. "They see a profitable prop tech startup. They don't see a platform that could reshape how humans interact with urban environments." She was right. Cityscape had evolved beyond building management into something much larger. Our biometric integration allowed seamless experiences across entire city districts. Employees could move between office buildings, retail spaces, and public transportation with a single authentication system. We weren't just managing properties, we were creating smart urban ecosystems. The validation felt incredible, but the isolation was becoming unbearable. Success without recognition from the people you love most is a special kind of loneliness. My relationship with my parents had calcified into a routine of polite distance, weekly phone calls where I shared nothing meaningful, and they offered advice I didn't need about a life they didn't understand. "Honey, your cousin Laura just got promoted to senior associate at her accounting firm," Mom mentioned during one of these calls. "She's doing really well for herself. Maybe you two should grab coffee when you're in town. She might have insights about professional development." I almost laughed. Laura was undoubtedly successful in her field, but Cityscape's quarterly revenue now exceeded her annual salary. Still, I found myself saying, "That sounds nice, Mom. I'll reach out to her." The lies were becoming harder to maintain. But the alternative, explaining the truth, felt impossible. How do you tell people who've spent decades viewing you as an underachiever that you've built a company worth tens of millions of dollars? How do you bridge a gap that wide without it seeming like you're deliberately rubbing their faces in their mistake? Ethan's relationship with me had grown increasingly patronizing. During family dinners, he'd offer career advice with the gentle condescension of someone speaking to a wayward child. "You know, Chloe, there are some really good corporate training programs out there. My hospital works with several companies that might be hiring. It could be a way to get your foot in the door somewhere with real growth potential." Real growth potential. I was sitting there, having grown a company from $0 to $8 million in annual revenue, and my brother was suggesting I apply for entry-level corporate training programs. I appreciate the thought, I'd say, but I'm learning a lot in my current role. Of course, but you can't stay in support roles forever. You're smart, Chloe. You just need to find the right opportunity to showcase that. Support roles. If only he knew I was the CEO, making strategic decisions that affected thousands of employees across dozens of cities. The cognitive dissonance reached a breaking point in early 2022. We just closed a major partnership with Sterling Realty, one of the largest commercial real estate firms in the Midwest. Our platform would manage their entire Chicago portfolio, over 200 buildings, housing more than 100,000 workers daily. The press release called it a game-changing partnership that positions Cityscape as the dominant player in the Midwest prop tech industry. Publications were describing us as the company to watch and the future of smart building management. That same week, Mom called with exciting news. "Chloe, I have wonderful news. Your father's golf partner mentioned that his company might be hiring for their IT help desk. It's entry-level, but it's a foot in the door at a stable company. Should I put in a good word for you?" I sat there in my corner office overlooking Lake Michigan, with signed contracts worth millions of dollars on my desk, listening to my mother offer to help me get a help desk job. "That's very thoughtful, Mom, but I'm really happy with my current position." Sweetheart, happiness is one thing, but you need to think about your future. Security, benefits, a real career path. A real career path. I was building the career path for an entire industry, but to her, it wasn't real because she couldn't see it. That night, I called my therapist, Dr. Evelyn Shaw, for an emergency session. I feel like I'm living a double life, I told her. And I'm starting to lose track of which version is real. What would make it feel real to you? She asked. Having the people I love see me for who I actually am. And what's stopping you from showing them? I considered the question seriously. Fear that they'll minimize it. Fear that they'll take credit for it. Fear that even with proof, they still won't really see me. And fear that if they finally see you and still don't approve, she'd finished for me. You'll have nowhere left to hide. She'd hit the core of it. As long as my family didn't know about my success, I could tell myself that their lack of approval stemmed from ignorance. If they knew everything and still found ways to diminish me, what would that say about our relationship? The answer came sooner than I expected. In March 2022, Titan Innovations reached out through intermediaries. They weren't just interested in Cityscape, they were interested in revolutionizing their entire approach to property management and urban development. They're talking about integration, not just acquisition, Maya said after our preliminary meeting with their representatives. They want to build their next-generation platform around our technology. The numbers being discussed were staggering. Initial conversations suggested a valuation in the $150 to $200 million range. It wasn't just life-changing money, it was family-silencing money. The kind of success that would be impossible to minimize or explain away. Are you ready for this? Maya asked. I don't know, I admitted. But I think it's time to find out. The due diligence process began in earnest. Teams of lawyers and accountants crawled through every aspect of our business. Titan's leadership team toured our offices, interviewed our employees, and stress-tested our technology platform. Through it all, I maintained my low profile. When Titan requested executive interviews, I participated via video call with my camera off, letting Maya handle most of the face-to-face meetings. When they asked for promotional materials, we provided Maya's photo and professional background, while describing me simply as Chloe H., co-founder and CEO. The strategy was deliberate. Maya became the public face of Cityscape, while I remained the phantom architect. Every industry publication featured her photograph alongside shadowy silhouettes or back-of-head shots of me. The mystery enhanced our reputation, but it also meant that even our most significant business partners knew me only as a voice on conference calls. They're going to want to meet you in person eventually, Maya warned. You can't stay anonymous through a $190 million acquisition. She was right, but I wasn't ready. Not yet. The final offer arrived on a Tuesday morning in June, $190 million, with earnouts that could push the total value to $225 million over 3 years. Maya and I would remain with the company post-acquisition, leading the integration of Cityscape's technology across Titan's entire portfolio. This is it, Maya said, reading through the term sheet. This is what we've been building toward. I stared at the numbers, and for the first time in years, I wasn't thinking about the money. I was thinking about the conversation I'd have to have with my parents. I was thinking about sitting across from them and explaining that their struggling daughter had just engineered one of the largest prop tech exits in Chicago history. There's something else, Maya said carefully. Samantha Reed, their VP of Corporate Development, mentioned that she's engaged to a doctor at Oakwood University Memorial. Someone named Ethan Hayes. My blood went cold. Ethan Hayes. Yeah. She seemed excited about some family dinner next week. Small world, right? Small world indeed. In 7 days, I'd be sitting at my brother's engagement dinner, meeting his fiancée, Samantha Reed. The same Samantha Reed who'd spent 3 months conducting due diligence on my company and negotiating the terms of my $190 million exit. The universe, it seemed, had decided it was time for my two worlds to collide, whether I was ready or not. All that remained was signing the papers and facing the consequences. The Vista Room, on the 95th floor of the Azure Tower, had been Ethan's choice for his engagement dinner, and I had to admit, it was perfect. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered panoramic views of Chicago, the city lights twinkling like scattered diamonds across black velvet. It was the kind of place that demanded celebration, success stories, and impressive achievements. Too bad they had no idea what story they'd be hearing tonight. I arrived exactly on time, not early enough to help with arrangements, as Mom had suggested, nor late enough to make an entrance. Just punctual and composed, like the businesswoman I'd secretly become. The hostess led me to our private dining room, where my family had already gathered around an elegantly set table for 12. Crystal glasses caught the ambient lighting, casting prismatic patterns across white linens. The Chicago River wound through the city below, its dark surface reflecting the urban skyline I'd helped make smarter. "Chloe." Ethan spotted me first, crossing the room with the easy confidence of someone who'd never questioned his place in the world. "I'm so glad you could make it." He embraced me warmly, and for a moment, I felt a pang of guilt about the revelation I'd be unleashing. Ethan wasn't a bad person. He was just someone who'd never been forced to see beyond his own experience. "Come meet Samantha," he said, guiding me toward the windows where a tall, elegant woman stood silhouetted against the city lights. Even from behind, I recognized her immediately. Samantha Reed, VP of Corporate Development, the woman who'd spent 3 months analyzing every aspect of my business. She turned as we approached, and I watched recognition flicker across her features, confusion at first, then slowly dawning realization. "Samantha, this is my sister, Chloe," Ethan said with barely concealed pride. "Chloe, meet Samantha Reed, my brilliant fiancée." "It's lovely to finally meet you," Samantha said, her professional composure intact despite the obvious shock in her eyes. "Ethan talks about you constantly." "I wonder what exactly he says," I thought, shaking her perfectly manicured hand. "Congratulations on your engagement," I said sincerely. "I'm happy for you both." Mom appeared at my elbow, her critical gaze scanning my outfit, a simple but elegant black dress that had cost more than most people's monthly rent, though she'd never know that. "Chloe, I see you found something appropriate to wear." "That's nice." The pause spoke volumes. "We've seated you next to Cousin Margaret. You always got along with her." Translation: they'd positioned me far from the important guests, where my lack of impressive achievements wouldn't detract from the evening's celebratory mood. Dinner began with champagne toasts that felt like elaborate theater. Dad spoke first, his voice thick with emotion as he raised his glass. "To my son, Ethan, who has made us proud every single day of his life. And to Samantha, a brilliant, accomplished woman worthy of him. We couldn't ask for a better addition to our family." Mom's toast followed, a carefully crafted speech highlighting Ethan's achievements from his first science fair victory to his recent promotion to chief resident. She concluded with, "And now he's found a partner equally dedicated to excellence." To Ethan and Samantha. As glasses clinked around the table, I noticed Samantha watching me with growing intensity, as if trying to reconcile the underachieving sister she'd heard about with something she couldn't quite place. The first course arrived, seared scallops with truffle oil, and conversation flowed around me like water around a stone. I fielded the usual questions about my job situation with practiced deflection. "I work in property technology," I told Cousin Margaret when she asked. "Data management and system integration." "Oh, that sounds technical," she replied with the same tone one might use to discuss a minor illness. "Is there room for advancement in that field?" Before I could answer, Uncle Frank leaned across the table. "Chloe, Ethan mentioned you might have a lead on a position at Apple. That would be quite a step up." "A step up?" I took a careful sip of wine, acutely aware of Samantha's eyes on me. In my purse was a signed contract making me one of the youngest female entrepreneurs to exit a prop tech company for 9 figures. But to my family, a hypothetical entry-level position at Apple would represent success. "I'm actually quite satisfied with my current work," I said simply. Dad overheard and joined the conversation with his usual paternal concern. "Chloe, there's no shame in accepting help to get your foot in the door somewhere respectable. We all want to see you succeed." Somewhere respectable. The irony was almost painful. From across the table, Samantha's stare intensified. Recognition was dawning in her eyes like a sunrise breaking over Lake Michigan. "Chloe," she said during a lull in conversation, her voice cutting through the ambient noise of clinking glasses and polite laughter. "Forgive me, but is your last name Hayes?" The table quieted. Ethan looked confused. "Of course it is. She's my sister." Samantha set down her fork with deliberate precision. "You're Chloe Hayes from Cityscape." And there it was. The moment I'd both dreaded and anticipated for years. "Yes," I said simply, meeting her gaze steadily. "Wait," Samantha continued, her professional demeanor cracking slightly. "You're the Chloe Hayes, the founder and CEO of Cityscape Technologies, the company my firm just acquired for $190 million? Ethan looked completely bewildered. "Samantha, I think you're confusing my sister with someone else. Chloe works in tech support or something." Samantha turned to stare at him in disbelief. "Ethan, I've been negotiating this acquisition for 3 months. Your sister just became one of the most successful prop tech entrepreneurs in the country." She looked back at me, realization dawning. "I can't believe I didn't connect it. You always talked about your sister Chloe, but Hayes is such a common name, and the ghost genius was this mysterious figure. We barely saw you in person during negotiations, always video calls with Maya as the primary contact." "The ghost genius?" Dad repeated weakly. "That's what the industry calls her," Samantha explained, her voice filled with professional admiration. "The brilliant CEO who revolutionized building management while maintaining complete privacy." Now I understand why. The silence that followed was absolute. Dad froze with his wine glass halfway to his lips. Mom's hand fluttered to her pearl necklace. Ethan sat there, processing the fact that every piece of career advice he'd ever given me had been directed at the CEO of a 9-figure company. "Wait, so all those times I offered you advice about getting a real job?" Ethan's voice trailed off as the full impact hit him. "I was talking to the CEO of a $190 million company?" "Oh my God, is this true?" Dad finally managed, his voice barely above a whisper. "Yes," I said, maintaining eye contact. "Maya Sanchez and I founded Cityscape 6 years ago. We currently employ 127 people across 8 cities and manage smart building systems for over 400 commercial properties." "But why wouldn't you tell us?" Mom's bewilderment seemed genuine, as if she couldn't fathom why someone would hide such success. Before I could answer, Samantha continued, her professional excitement overriding the awkward family dynamics. "Your platform revolutionized building management efficiency by 73% across our test portfolio. The biometric integration capabilities are light years ahead of anything else in the market. You've essentially created the neural system for smart cities. It's why we were willing to pay such a premium." $190 million. Dad repeated the number like a prayer. Samantha nodded, still processing the connection herself. "The acquisition closed this morning. Your sister just engineered one of the largest prop tech exits in Chicago history. But Chloe works in IT support," Ethan said weakly, as if saying it aloud might make it true. "Your sister," Samantha replied, "is the CEO who just revolutionized how 200,000 office workers interact with their buildings daily. Her biometric integration platform is being studied by universities as the future of urban technology." The rest of the dinner passed in a surreal blur of shocked questions and awkward revelations. Relatives who'd pitted me an hour before suddenly wanted investment advice. Mom mentioned 3 times that she'd always known I had a special talent with computers. Dad bragged that he'd told golf partners about his daughter, the tech entrepreneur, for years. Through it all, I maintained my composure, answering questions politely but without the desperate hunger for approval that had defined so much of my earlier life. The validation I'd once craved now felt hollow against the backdrop of their sudden, opportunistic pride. "Why didn't you tell us?" Ethan asked as the evening wound down, his voice carrying a mixture of hurt and genuine bewilderment. The confident older brother who'd always had easy answers was gone, replaced by someone grappling with a reality that challenged everything he thought he knew about our family dynamics. "Because I needed to know I could succeed without your approval," I said gently. "And I needed to build something so undeniable that it couldn't be minimized or explained away." We would never minimize your achievements, Mom protested, though her voice lacked conviction. Mom, I said carefully. 3 weeks ago, you offered to help me get an entry-level help desk position. Last Christmas, you suggested I apply to secretarial school. For 6 years, every conversation we've had included subtle suggestions that I get a real job. Ethan winced visibly. All those times I offered you career advice about corporate training programs and getting your foot in the door somewhere. I was talking to someone who is already running a company worth more than I'll make in my entire medical career. You weren't trying to be condescending, I said. You were trying to help based on the information you had. I'm the one who kept you in the dark. But why didn't you trust us to support you? Dad asked, and for the first time all evening, he sounded genuinely hurt rather than defensive. I trusted your love, but I didn't trust your respect. I needed to know I could succeed without your approval before I could risk asking for it. Samantha, who'd been watching this family drama unfold with the fascination of an anthropologist, finally spoke up. For what it's worth, your reputation in the industry is extraordinary. People call you the ghost genius. The brilliant CEO who revolutionized prop tech while maintaining total privacy. Now I understand why. As we said our goodbyes, Mom clutched my arm with a grip that bordered on desperate. We need to talk properly, Chloe. Soon. About everything. I nodded, knowing the conversation was inevitable, but no longer fearing it. We will, Mom. Walking to my car through the Chicago night, I felt a weight lifting from my shoulders that I hadn't even realized I'd been carrying. The secret that had defined my adult life was finally in the open. Whatever came next, I would face it on my own terms, secure in the knowledge of what I'd built and who I'd become. My phone buzzed with a text from Maya. How did it go? Are you okay? I typed back, it went exactly like we thought it would. And yes, I'm more than okay. I'm finally free. The first text from my parents arrived before I even reached my apartment. We need to talk tomorrow. The Grand Park Hotel at 11 a.m., Mom. By morning, my phone was flooded with messages. Relatives who hadn't spoken to me in years suddenly remembered they'd always supported my computer interests. Cousins asked about investment opportunities. Uncle Frank sent 3 separate messages, each more effusive than the last, about my amazing success. Ethan's message was different. I'm confused and I feel like an idiot. Can we talk? I replied only to my parents, agreeing to brunch, and to Ethan. Yes, we definitely need to talk. Some conversations I'd learned were worth waiting years to have. The view from my new office at Titan Innovations never got old. 42 floors above the Chicago River, I could see the entire grid of smart buildings that now ran on Cityscape's integrated platform. What had started as a dream sketched on napkins had become the backbone of urban intelligence across 3 time zones. The Singapore expansion is ahead of schedule, Maya said, settling into the chair across from my desk. As Chief Technology Officer for Titan's Smart Cities Division, she'd overseen our platform's international rollout with characteristic precision. They want to implement our system across 12 buildings in their financial district by Q2. And the London partnership signed this morning, 17 properties in London Docklands, full biometric integration. The mayor's office is even interested in citywide implementation. I smiled, spinning my chair to face the windows. Cityscape wasn't just a Chicago success story anymore. We were reshaping how humans interacted with urban environments on a global scale. Buildings across 4 continents now used our technology to create seamless, intelligent experiences for over 800,000 people daily. The adjustment to life post-acquisition hadn't been seamless, but it had been rewarding. Working within Titan's structure meant access to resources we'd never dreamed of as a startup. But it also meant learning to navigate corporate politics and maintaining our innovative culture within a larger organization. Daniel wants to know if you're ready for the Tokyo presentation next month, Maya continued, referring to Titan's CEO. The Japanese partners are specifically requesting the ghost genius herself. I laughed. That nickname had followed me into my new role, though I'd finally started doing public interviews and conference presentations. The mystery was part of my brand now, but I was no longer hiding. Tell Daniel I'll be there. It's time I met our Japanese partners face to face. My relationship with my family had found its own equilibrium over the past 6 months. The initial shock had given way to a more complex process of rebuilding relationships on new terms. It hadn't been smooth. There had been awkward conversations, hurt feelings, and moments when old patterns threatened to reassert themselves, but it had been real. My parents had struggled initially with what my success meant for their worldview. Dad had gone through what I could only describe as an identity crisis, questioning his assumptions about stable career paths and traditional achievement. Mom had oscillated between defensive pride and genuine attempts to understand the technology industry. The breakthrough had come during a family dinner 3 months after the revelation. Ethan had invited everyone to his apartment to celebrate his residency match, and for the first time in years, the conversation hadn't centered around achievements and comparisons. "I've been thinking about what you said," Dad had told me over dessert, about us never really asking what you wanted. "I realize I spent so much time trying to protect you from failure that I never learned to recognize your success." It wasn't a complete apology, but it was a start. It was understanding. Mom's transformation had been more gradual. She'd started taking online courses in business technology, reading industry publications, and asking genuine questions about my work. Last week, she'd sent me an article about prop tech innovations with a note. "This reminded me of what you and Maya built. I'm starting to understand why it matters." Ethan's adjustment had been the most dramatic. Discovering that his struggling sister was actually a tech executive had forced him to confront his own assumptions about success and failure. The conversations we'd had since the dinner had been more honest than anything we'd shared in years. "I keep thinking about all the times I offered you career advice," he said during one particularly raw conversation. "How condescending I must have sounded." "You weren't trying to be condescending," I'd replied. "You were trying to help based on the information you had. I'm the one who kept you in the dark." "But why did you not trust us?" That question had taken me weeks to answer honestly. I trusted your love, but I didn't trust your respect. I needed to know I could succeed without your approval before I could risk asking for it. The relationship that had surprised me most was with Samantha. What could have been an awkward connection had evolved into a genuine friendship. Her position as both family member and professional colleague gave her unique insight into my dual nature, and she'd become something of a translator between my two worlds. "Your family is learning," she told me over coffee last week. "They're having to expand their definition of what success looks like. That's not easy for people who've built their identities around traditional achievement." She was right. My parents weren't malicious people. They were people who'd found security and meaning in conventional paths and had wanted to share that security with their children. Learning to see beyond those boundaries required genuine effort and humility. The most unexpected development had been my emergence as a mentor in the tech community. Once a month, I hosted workshops for young women in STEM fields, sharing not just technical knowledge, but the emotional resilience needed to pursue unconventional paths. "My parents think programming is just a hobby, eh?" 15-year-old named Maya had told me during our last session, echoing my own teenage experience. "They want me to focus on pre-med courses." "What do you want to build?" I asked, the same question I wish someone had asked me at her age. "Apps that help people with disabilities navigate public spaces more easily," she replied without hesitation. "My little brother has autism, and I see how hard it is for him to feel comfortable in crowded places." "Then build them," I said, offering her the same encouragement I'd had to give myself. "Find people who believe in your vision, even if they're not your family, and keep the door open for your parents to understand later." These sessions reminded me why I'd fought so hard to build Cityscape in the first place. Technology wasn't about the money or the recognition. It was about creating solutions that made people's lives better. Every young woman who left our workshops feeling empowered to pursue her technical dreams was validation beyond any acquisition deal. My phone buzzed with a calendar reminder: dinner with family, 7 p.m. These monthly gatherings had become a treasured tradition, something I would have found unimaginable a year ago. "Heading out early?" Maya asked, noticing me packing my laptop. "Family dinner. Ethan's cooking, which means Samantha's probably bringing backup takeout." "How are things with them now?" I considered the question. Different. Better. Real, for the first time in years. That evening, I drove to Ethan and Samantha's apartment in Lincoln Park, a beautiful space they'd chosen together that reflected both their personalities. The walls featured medical awards alongside technology industry recognition, a visual representation of how our family had learned to expand its definition of achievement. Chloe. Ethan opened the door with flour in his hair and an apron reading, "Trust me, I'm a doctor. I only set off the smoke alarm once tonight." "Progress," I laughed, embracing him. Samantha appeared from the kitchen, carrying a bottle of wine and looking amused. "I may have ordered pizza as backup. Your brother's ambitious, but not always realistic about his culinary skills." "Smart woman," I said. "That's why you're perfect for him." Mom and Dad arrived shortly after, both looking more relaxed than they had in months. Dad had been reading business magazines to better understand my industry, while Mom had started following tech news and occasionally sent me articles she found interesting. "How was the board meeting today?" Dad asked as we settled around their dining table. 6 months ago, he wouldn't have known I attended board meetings. Now he asked specific questions about quarterly projections and market expansion. "Productive. We approved the funding for our mental health initiative, smart building systems that can detect stress patterns and adjust environmental factors to improve well-being." "That sounds like it could help a lot of people," Mom said, and I could tell she genuinely meant it. Over dinner, Ethan's surprisingly edible chicken parmesan, supplemented by Samantha's backup pizza, the conversation flowed naturally between my work, Ethan's medical cases, and family news. For the first time in years, I didn't feel the need to downplay my achievements or navigate around uncomfortable topics. "I have an announcement," I said as we finished dessert. "Forbes wants to feature me on the cover of their next issue. 'The Ghost Genius Steps into the Light' is the proposed headline." "That's incredible," Samantha said, raising her wine glass. "A cover story. Our daughter on the cover of Forbes," Mom said wonderingly. "Richard, do you realize what this means?" "It means we raised an extraordinary woman," Dad replied, looking directly at me. "It just took us too long to recognize it." The moment could have felt hollow, validation coming only after undeniable proof of success. But it didn't. It felt like healing. Like the beginning of relationships built on who we actually were, rather than who we pretended to be. "There's something else," I continued. "I'm starting a foundation, Hidden Potential. It'll provide mentorship and funding for young women pursuing unconventional paths in STEM fields." "Like what you wish you'd had?" Ethan asked, understanding immediately. "Exactly. Nobody should have to build their dreams in complete silence." "Count us in," Samantha said immediately. "Whatever you need, board positions, funding, connections. We'd like to help, too," Mom added. "I may not understand all the technical aspects, but I understand the importance of supporting young women's ambitions." As the evening wound down, I found myself standing on their balcony with Ethan, looking out over the city lights. So many of those buildings now use cityscape technology, creating seamless experiences for thousands of people every day. "I owe you an apology," he said quietly. "A real one. For years of treating you like someone who needed fixing instead of someone who was building something incredible." "You don't owe me anything," I replied. We were both trying to navigate a family that had very specific ideas about success. You happened to fit those ideas, and I didn't. But I should have seen you. Really seen you. You see me now. That's what matters." We stood in comfortable silence, watching the city pulse with life below us. Somewhere in that urban sprawl, a teenager was probably teaching herself to code in her bedroom, dreaming of building something that would change the world. I hoped she had people who believed in her vision. If not, I hoped she'd find them or find her way to one of our hidden potential workshops. "You know what's funny?" Ethan said eventually. "What?" "I spent my whole life trying to make Mom and Dad proud by following their path. You made them proud by creating your own." I smiled. "Different kinds of courage, I guess." "Yeah, but yours was harder." "Maybe it was, but it had also been mine. Completely, authentically mine. And that made all the difference." Later that night, back in my apartment, I stood on my own balcony overlooking Lake Michigan. The water reflected the city lights like scattered diamonds, each one representing someone whose life had been touched by technology we'd created. My phone buzzed with a text from Maya. "Saw the Forbes announcement on social media. Ready to be famous?" I typed back, ready to be seen. Tomorrow, I'd wake up as Chloe Hayes, CEO of Titan's Smart Cities division, Forbes cover story, and founder of Hidden Potential. But tonight, I was simply someone who'd learned that the best validation comes from within, and that sometimes, if you're patient and persistent enough, the people you love most will learn to see you clearly, too. The city stretched out below, full of smart buildings that would make tomorrow a little easier for hundreds of thousands of people. Not bad for a girl who'd once been told that computers were just a hobby. Success, I'd learned, wasn't about proving others wrong. It was about proving yourself right. And sometimes, if you built something undeniable enough, the world, including your family, will have no choice but to see you for who you really are. What do you think about Chloe's story? If you were in her position, would you keep building your dreams in silence until they were too big to ignore? Or would you demand recognition from the start, even if it meant facing dismissal? Have you ever felt invisible to the people whose approval you craved most? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I'm reading everything. And don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more stories about finding your true worth, building success on your own terms, and the courage to stay authentic, even when the world expects you to be someone else.